I understand you're not from a large city area. Are you from a farm or a small town?
Small town.
What part of a small town? The so-called good side of the tracks or the other side?
The other side.
When you say the other side, exactly what do you mean? What was wrong over there?
Well, where all the guys get in trouble all the time.
You mean the police were down there all the time?
That's right.
And you were raised in that particular area, is that right?
That's right.
How old were you when you got into what I might ask to be your first major difficulty with the law?
Well, I was 17. I stole a car.
Why a car, and why then?
Well, I got in a family argument one night, and I just wanted to get out of town. I was mad at everybody. So I went uptown and I stole a car and started to leave.
What was wrong at home?
Well, that's none of your business.
You stole the car, you went uptown. How long before you were caught?
Well, the same night.
By the county police or state police?
State police.
What happened to you then? They put you in jail?
Right.
What next?
Well, I went to court and the judge gave me probation. I beat the rap.
When you say you beat the rap, what do you mean? You didn't consider probation too heavy?
No, I thought I got off pretty light. I mean,
Did you make probation all right, or did you get in some more difficulty?
No, I got in a little trouble.
What sort of
trouble? A couple
trouble?
of weeks after probation.
What sort of trouble did you get in?
Well, I burglarized a place and got sent away to reformatory.
For how long?
For 1 to 3 years.
So you violated your probation. Well, what did it mean to you to violate your probation? That would be pretty rough on the average person.
It didn't bother me.
Well, why
it
didn't
just
it?
happened.
Why didn't it bother you? Would it bother the average person?
Well, I'm not the average person.
Did reformatory do anything for you?
Oh, I met a few guys that knew a little more about the kind of life I wanted to lead, and I learned a little more about what I wanted to do when I got out.
In other words, you were getting an education in there, not the type of education that I would consider a good one. Is that right?
That's right.
When you got out, where did you go? Did you go out on parole, or did you serve all your time?
No, I went out on parole, and I got out on parole and went to Oklahoma. And I met a couple of guys in Oklahoma in a bar one night. And, well, they were the same kind of guys as me, so I started talking to them. We got pretty friendly. And we went out this certain night and robbed about 9 motels.
You were using a gun,
Right.
and you met some fellows in a bar.
That's right.
You said they were something like you. What do you mean by that?
Well, they kind of thought the same way I did, and they wanted the same things I did.
They wanted the same things. Well, when you say that they thought the same way you did, what are you talking about? What do you mean by that?
Well, they wanted money easy. They didn't want to work for it. There's a lot of suckers in the world, and we didn't figure we were the suckers, so we just get it the easy way.
Didn't you figure there was anything wrong with this? This might sound a little funny to you from what you've said, but a man could have gotten killed in a motel robbery. What about that?
He got killed.
Didn't make any difference to you?
That's right.
Why?
Well,
Why wouldn't it make a difference to you for a man to get killed? Maybe by your hand.
I wouldn't nobody worry about me if I got killed or anything. So I don't worry about anybody else. If I'd killed him, it'd just been another death to me, is all.
That's the way you operated?
That's right.
That's the way these fellows operated?
That's right.
Did you think you were big timers?
That's right.
Well, what happened? Did you get caught for that?
Yeah, we got caught, and I went in front of this other judge, and I beat that rap, too.
How did you beat it?
Well, the judge asked me if I wanted to go in the Army, and naturally I said yes. So I went in the Army, and I wasn't in there very long.
What happened?
Oh, they kicked me out.
For what?
Well, just about everything. I just didn't like the Army or the people in it.
Where did you go after you got booted out of the Army?
Well, I went home. I thought maybe I still had a home. I went home for a couple of days, but it was the same thing, so I took off again. I didn't want to work, though.
And that put you nowhere, more or less. You didn't want to work.
That's right.
What did you do?
Well, I started meeting older women than me.
They were supporting you? You were living with them?
That's right.
How long can something like that go on?
Well, until I end up in a penitentiary for the rest of my life.
He didn't care, didn't matter, and the others didn't care, and it didn't matter. Here was a person who was no longer responsive to the judgments, the point of view of others toward him. That record, that whole series of negative experiences with the law, meant that he was branded. He was put aside, and his life was there. I don't care. You've just heard Captain Richard Boone of the Juvenile Bureau of the Sheriff's Police of Cook County interviewing a young man who is the self of a delinquent, of a criminal, who conceives of himself as one who will live permanently on the other side of the law. Let's turn now to an expert who day by day experiences men just such as this young man in his capacity as classification officer and director of correctional services at the Cook County, Illinois jail. Dr. Hyman H. Frankel, one-time member of the Faculty of Sociology at the University of Illinois. Dr. Frankel, in your capacity at the jail, you meet day after day young men like this, and I suspect your institution, unwittingly and without intending to, contributes in some measure to the development of attitudes just such as this.
This young man that was just interviewed, I think, Sheriff, illustrates a very classic case of the kind of person and the qualities and the experiences that such a delinquent goes through as a result of his experiences with the law enforcement agencies, particularly jail and prison.
Well, let's look at a young man like this in the large. He emerges out of the community, our community, yours and mine, and our listeners. What is the place of the community in the creation of an attitude toward oneself such as this young man has?
I believe, Sheriff, we can point to two major aspects in the development of a delinquent for which the community and the public must bear full responsibility and liability. I refer in the first place to such social conditions that exist in a community, such as lack of adequate housing, slums, lack of adequate educational facilities, and lack of adequate recreational facilities. To have a child or to have children born and grow up under such circumstances is to deprive them of the social and psychological nutrition necessary for the development into mature and socially responsible adulthood. Circumstances like these instead produce children in distress, children who are socially and psychologically undernourished, and therefore become susceptible to delinquent influences.
Of course, in their distress, I take it, they turn to places and to others who can comfort them. And too often, it represented by the company of persons just like themselves.
Too often, the only avenues for escape from their confusion are delinquent associates and the kind of excitement that this association provides.
Well, now, just what is the responsibility of the community in this respect, then?
Well, what we need, for example, is responsible leadership to mobilize forces against things like inadequate housing. We need the organization of those social agencies to direct their efforts towards problems like these, toward inadequate schooling, toward inadequate recreational facilities. This seems obvious.
Well, on the other hand, most people think of responsible action by the community toward crime and delinquency as consisting of detecting, arresting, detaining, incarcerating, perhaps paroling, that this is a responsible way to get on top of the crime problem. Now, would you regard this as responsibly facing up to the problem of the control of the delinquent self?
This refers to the second feature, for which the community must bear full responsibility in the delinquency problem. That is, here I refer to those law enforcement agencies in a community which administer justice and the way that they administer that justice in the treatment of the apprehended delinquent. Now, depending on how this treatment is presented to the youthful offender, depending upon what law means to him as it comes presented to him through the police, through the courts, through the detention facilities, will determine whether this boy, whether this youth will be further confirmed in his delinquency or whether he can be corrected to follow conventional patterns of behavior.
Well, there's an oversimplification of the problem that I'm sure you're aware of and that I certainly have experienced in my capacity as a law enforcement officer and as a student of the problem, namely that in our extreme reliance on methods of detention, arrest, etc., we are sometimes disposed unwittingly to actually provide this underprivileged, rejected youngster with the material in terms of which he can be confirmed in his attitude toward himself as a delinquent, rather than to change that attitude in the direction of conventional society.
Take some of these aspects. If, for example, the arrest procedure is simply one of instilling fear and resentment and distrust, hostility in the youngster, this obviously will do nothing but alienate him from the law of our society. Take something like the court. If this experience is nothing but admonishment to the youngster on the part of the judge, this again means nothing but distrust and alienation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frankel. The delinquent self, later the criminal self, a product of society's misadventures in providing young people with those experiences and opportunities for actually being brought in line with the general conventional norms and standards of society. By the same token, when we do get a youngster who begins to show initial difficulty, instead of capturing him and bringing him back into the normal wake and run of society, we are disposed to take him apart. And by so handling him in special terms and senses as to remind him of his essentially evil or sinful character, as to impress upon him our attitude that he's a wrongdoer, and that as a wrongdoer we will continue to act toward him, be with him only in the sense that he takes to himself that idea that he is a wrongdoer. But an act of will not correct his problem. We must see in delinquency that our acts, as well as the community's responsibility generally, is in the direction of either providing a constructive psychological influence for this youngster so that he can conceive of himself as a normal, law-abiding person, else he may, in fact, become a delinquent even through our own direction and at our instance. Thank you for being with us today.